I never thought I'd be the kind of man who checks his wife's phone. But that night, as I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped her phone. Emily was in the shower, humming like nothing in. The world could touch her. I wish I could say I was driven by suspicion alone, but the truth is, for weeks, something had felt off. The way she'd started locking her phone, the late-night texts she'd answer with her back to me, the sudden, unexplained work events that kept her out until midnight. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. There it was, messages from someone named Jake. Not just a co-worker, as she'd claimed, but something else entirely. The words were intimate, playful, and unmistakably romantic. Photos, too. My heart hammered in my chest as I scrolled, each message a punch to the gut. I felt like I was watching my life unravel in real time. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, reading message after message until the water stopped running and Emily stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her dark brown hair dripping onto her shoulders. She saw the phone in my hand before I could hide it. Her blue eyes widened for a split second, but then her face hardened. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice flat, almost bored. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. "Who is Jake?" I managed to choke out. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look away. "You went through my phone?" she said, as if that was the real crime. I remember the way she stood there, so calm, so composed, water still glistening on her skin. Emily had always been the center of every room I had this confidence, this energy that drew people in. I used to love that about her. Now it felt like a weapon. "I know everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long has this been going on?" She shrugged, not bothering to wrap the towel tighter. "A few months." "I didn't want to hurt you, David, but I can't keep pretending. Things haven't been right between us for a long time." I felt like I was falling. My mind raced back over the past year, every argument, every cold shoulder, every time she'd pulled away from me in bed. I wanted to ask her why, to beg her to stop, to tell her we could fix it, but all I could do was stand there, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She walked past me into the bedroom and started getting dressed like it was just another night. I followed her, desperate for answers, but she wouldn't look at me. "Emily, please," I said, my voice cracking. "What about the kids? What about us?" She paused, finally meeting my eyes. "I'm not leaving the kids, David, but I can't live a lie anymore. I need something different. We both do." The room spun. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to process what was happening. The woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my children, was telling me it was over, and she didn't even seem sorry. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I realized my marriage was built on sand, and the tide had finally come in. The days after that night felt like I was living in someone else's skin. I went to work, picked up the kids from school, made dinner, but everything was on autopilot. Emily, on the other hand, seemed lighter, almost relieved. She started spending even more time on her phone, texting and laughing at messages I knew weren't from me. I tried to talk to her, tried to understand what she wanted, but every conversation felt like I was talking to a stranger. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table. She wore her favorite blue sweater, the one that matched her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but firm. I braced myself for the worst. Maybe she was going to leave. Maybe she'd already packed her bags. But what she said next blindsided me. "I don't want a divorce," she began, But I can't go back to pretending everything is fine. I want us to have an open marriage, Ati. First, I thought I'd misheard her. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She leaned forward, her blue eyes locking onto mine.
I'm not happy, David. I haven't been for a long time. I need more freedom. I want to be able to see other people. And I think you should too. Maybe that's what we need to fix things. I stared at her, stunned. The woman I'd loved.
For over a decade, the mother of my children was asking me to share her. It felt like a nightmare. You're saying you want to keep seeing Jake? I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded, not even flinching. And I want you to have the
same freedom. I'm not trying to hurt you, David. I can't live like this anymore. I need to be honest with myself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced with questions. Was I not enough? Was our family not enough? I wanted to scream, to beg her to change her mind, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Emily had always been stubborn, fiercely independent.
It was one of the things that drew me to her in the beginning. Her confidence, her refusal to settle for anything less than what she wanted. But now, that same strength felt like a wall I couldn't climb. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. I watched Emily come and go, watched her get dressed up to go out, watched her kiss the kids goodnight, and then leave to meet someone else. I felt humiliated, powerless, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I kept thinking about our kids, Liam and Sophie, just 8 and 6 years old. They needed both of us. I convinced myself that I could handle it, that maybe this was just a phase that Emily would come to her senses. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. The woman I loved was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I agreed to her terms, not because I wanted to, but because I was too afraid of losing my family completely. I told myself I was being strong, that I was doing it for the kids. But the truth was I was just scared of being alone, scared
of starting over, scared of admitting that the life I'd built was falling apart right in front of me.
If I thought agreeing to Emily's terms would somehow make things easier, I was wrong. The reality of an open marriage hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. Every night she went out, I sat alone in the living room, pretending to watch TV while my mind raced with images I didn't want to see. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional sound of the kids' laughter drifting down the hallway. I tried to focus on them, to be present, but it was like living with a constant ache in my chest. Emily thrived in this new arrangement. She was always on her phone, always smiling at messages from people I'd never met. She started dressing differently, more daring, more vibrant. She wore her hair down more often, letting those dark waves tumble over her shoulders, and she'd put on makeup just to go out for drinks with friends. She was radiant, magnetic, and for the first time I realized how much of her energy had been missing from our marriage. But the more she glowed, the smaller I felt. It wasn't just Emily who changed. Our friends started noticing too. At first, they tried to be supportive, inviting us to dinner parties and backyard barbecues like nothing had changed. But word got out quickly. People whispered behind our backs. Some of Emily's friends admired her bravery, but most of our circle pulled away. Invitations dried up. I felt the judgment every time I dropped the kids off at school or ran into neighbors at the grocery store. I could see it in their eyes, pity, confusion, even disgust. The kids sensed something was wrong, even if they couldn't put it into words. Liam, our oldest, started acting out at school. Sophie became clingier, refusing to sleep unless one of us stayed in her room until she drifted off. I tried to shield them from the tension, but it seeped into everything. Family dinners were awkward, filled with forced conversation and long silences. Sometimes Emily would come home late, smelling of perfume and wine, and I'd lie awake all night staring at the ceiling, wondering how we'd gotten here. I tried to take Emily's advice and see other people, but my heart wasn't in it. I went on a few dates, met women through friends and dating apps, but it all felt empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying myself, that I was just going through the motions to prove a point. The truth was, I still loved Emily, even as she slipped further and further away from me. My mental health started to unravel. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly. I became irritable with the kids, snapping at them for small things and then hating myself for it. I started seeing a therapist, desperate for someone to talk to who wouldn't judge me or tell me what I should do. The therapist listened, nodded, and gently pushed me to focus on what I could control: my own happiness, my own healing. But it was hard to see a way out. Every day felt like a new humiliation, a new reminder that the life I'd built was crumbling through it all. I kept hoping Emily would come back to me, that she'd realize what she was losing. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that she was chasing something I couldn't give her. I was left to pick up the pieces, to hold our family together with nothing but sheer willpower. And even that was starting to slip through my fingers. The turning point came on a rainy Saturday afternoon, months after Emily first demanded the open marriage. I was folding laundry in the living room, half listening to the kids argue over a board game, when Emily walked in looking defeated. Her hair was tangled, her makeup smudged, and for the first time in ages, she looked tired, really tired. She barely glanced at me as she dropped her purse on the counter and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard the door click shut behind her. It was so unlike the confident, untouchable Emily I'd watched blossom in her new life. Something had changed. Later that evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy smile at us anymore?" The question cut deeper than any argument ever could. I sat there, stroking her hair, promising her that things would get better, even though I didn't believe it myself. After the kids were asleep, I found Emily sitting alone in the dark, staring
at her phone. She didn't notice me at first, but when she finally looked up, her eyes were red. "Is everything okay?"
I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Jake doesn't want to see me anymore," she whispered. "He says it's too complicated." I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. For months, she'd chased this fantasy of freedom and excitement, only to be left alone when it no longer suited him. I wanted to say, "I told you so," but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just sat with her in the silence. The fallout was swift. Emily's friends, who had once cheered her on, started to drift away. Some stopped returning her calls. Others made excuses not to meet up. Even her family, who had tried to stay neutral, began to pull back. I overheard her on the phone with her sister one night, her voice trembling as she tried to explain herself. The loneliness was catching up to her, and for the first time, she seemed to realize the cost of her choices. Meanwhile, I was forced to confront my own pain head-on. Therapy became a lifeline. My therapist encouraged me to find small joys again, cooking breakfast with the kids, going for walks, reconnecting with old friends. I started running in the mornings just to clear my head. The more I focused on myself and the kids, the more I realized how much of my life had revolved around trying to make Emily happy. I began to see flashes of the person I used to be, someone who laughed easily, who had dreams and ambitions of his own. One afternoon, while picking up Sophie from school, I ran into an old friend, Melissa. She'd always been kind, and we ended up talking for almost an hour in the parking lot. For the first time in months, I felt seen not as a victim, not as a broken man, but as myself. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks we started meeting for coffee, then dinners. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people trying to find their footing again. Emily noticed the change. She grew quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes I caught her watching me with a look I couldn't quite read, regret maybe, or longing for something she couldn't name. The balance in our home shifted. The kids gravitated towards me, sensing the stability I was fighting so hard to provide. I wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but for the first time I could see a path forward. I realized I wasn't powerless. I could choose to rebuild, not just for myself, but for Liam and Sophie. And that decision changed everything. Rebuilding my life didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, uneven process, filled with setbacks and small victories. Melissa became a steady presence, someone who listened without judgment and encouraged me to believe in myself again. We started spending more time together, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just the two of us. She never pushed, never tried to fill the void Emily had left. Instead, she helped me see that I was still worthy of love and happiness. No matter how broken I felt, at home the atmosphere changed. I became more present for Liam and Sophie, making sure they felt safe and loved. We started new routines: Saturday morning pancakes, movie nights on Fridays, trips to the park whenever the weather allowed. The kids responded quickly, their laughter returning, their anxiety easing. I could see them slowly healing, and it gave me hope that maybe I could heal too. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to shrink into herself. She was home more often, but her presence was like a shadow, quiet, withdrawn, and heavy. She rarely spoke to me unless it was about the kids. Sometimes I'd catch her watching us from the doorway, her expression unreadable. I wondered if she regretted the choices she'd made, but I never asked. We were living under the same roof, but our lives were moving in opposite directions. It wasn't long before I realized that I needed to make a real change, not just for myself, but for my
children.
The open marriage had failed. The tension in the house was hurting all of us. After a long talk with my therapist and several sleepless nights, I decided to file for custody. I wanted to give Liam and Sophie a stable home, free from the confusion and pain that had become our daily reality. The legal process was grueling. Emily was shocked when she was served the papers. At first, she fought back, insisting that she could be the mother our kids needed. But as the weeks went by, it became clear to everyone, including her, that she was struggling. Her job performance suffered, her friends stopped calling, and she became more isolated than ever. I felt a mixture of guilt and relief. This wasn't what I'd wanted for her, but I couldn't sacrifice my children's well-being for her mistakes. Melissa supported me every step of the way. She never tried to replace Emily as a mother, but she became a trusted adult in my kids' lives. They adored her, and seeing them happy with her made me realize how much we'd all been missing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something real, something that could last. The day we stood before the judge, I was terrified. But when the ruling came down in my favor, granting me primary custody, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I hugged Liam and Sophie, promising them that things would only get better from here. Emily sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew she needed to face the consequences of her choices. As we left the courthouse, Melissa squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, David," she whispered, and for the first time since my world had fallen apart, I believed her. I was finally taking control of my life, not just surviving, but truly living again. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with hope, a hope I hadn't felt in years. Life after the court's decision felt like stepping into sunlight after years of rain. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, slowly became a place of warmth again. Liam and Sophie adapted quickly to the new routine. They thrived with the stability, their laughter echoing through the rooms, their drawings taped proudly to the fridge. Melissa became a gentle, steady presence in our lives. She never tried to replace Emily, but she brought a kindness and patience that the kids gravitated toward. Our home was healing, and so was I. Emily, meanwhile, drifted further away. She moved into a small apartment across town, and her visits with the kids were awkward at first. She tried to make up for lost time, showering them with gifts and apologies, but children sense authenticity. They were polite but distant, unsure how to navigate the new version of their mother. Sometimes, after dropping them off, she'd linger at the door, her eyes searching mine for some sign of forgiveness or understanding. I felt for her, I really did, but I couldn't save her from the consequences of her own choices. She was living in the aftermath of decisions she'd made without thinking about the cost. I focused on rebuilding, not just for the kids, but for myself. I started a new job, one that challenged me and made me feel alive again. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local basketball league, and even started painting, something I hadn't done since college. Melissa and I took things slow, letting our relationship grow naturally. She was there for the small moments, helping with homework, cheering at soccer games, and listening when the weight of the past threatened to pull me under. With her, I learned that love didn't have to be dramatic or painful. It could be quiet, steady, and safe. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. I thought about everything that had happened: Emily's betrayal, the heartbreak, the endless nights of doubt and fear. I realized that in a strange way I was grateful. Not for the pain, but for what it had taught me. I'd learned to set boundaries, to fight for what mattered, and to let go of what I couldn't control. I'd discovered strength I never knew I had. Emily's life, from what I could see, was lonely. She'd lost touch with most of her friends, and her family kept their distance. The excitement she'd chased with Jake and the idea of freedom had vanished, replaced by regret and isolation. Sometimes I'd catch her watching us at school events or in the park, her eyes filled with longing. She'd chosen a path that promised happiness, but karma had a way of demanding payment in full. As for me, I made peace with the past. I forgave Emily, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger would only poison the new life I was building. I focused on my children, on Melissa, and on the future we were creating together. There were scars, of course, there always are, but they were a reminder of how far I'd come. Looking back, I realized that karma's response wasn't just about punishment. It was about balance, about restoring what had been broken. Emily's choices had set everything in motion, but in the end, it was my own resilience, my willingness to heal and move forward that shaped my destiny. I wasn't the same man I'd been before, but I was stronger, wiser, and finally, truly free.